it up now. Turn it up. Turn it up.
Yeah, hey, that was almost flawless. All of my fancy new animations. Welcome to Second Order Chaos. My name is Rando, and I'm going to try to talk as upbeat and high register as I can, because this is a heavy, heavy fucking topic we're about to tackle. Good evening, everybody. Good evening, Nicole.
Good evening.
How are you? How is everything?
I'm doing well.
Yeah?
It's Thursday, so we're almost done with the week.
Yeah, what a long month this week has been.
It has. It has.
It's I mean, on one hand it does go fast. On the other hand, oh man, is that my Discord pinging? God, I hope not. On the other hand, like it just a lot has happened, especially this week. Like a whole lot has happened.
Yes.
But it's cool. Like I guess the weekend counts if you don't have kids.
Very true.
Because oh man, is that do I keep digging like that?
Yeah, I can't tell if it's mine or yours.
I think it might be mine. Hold on. Let me well, we're just gonna riff a little bit while I check this out and see why the hell it keeps doing that. User settings. Let's see here. Where's all my notifications and shit? Notifications. Man, I set it to never. I don't know why it's doing that. Well, whatever. That's fine. Oh no, I lost you. Shit. This is what I get for and now I went back to there. All right, we're gonna figure this out. We're gonna figure this out eventually. All right, we're all good.
Yeah.
So yes, hi. We are on Second Order Chaos with the lovely Nicole Beckwith. Just a disclaimer before we get into this. This is about law enforcement. This is about the riots. This is about the protests. This is about every single thing that none of us can want to deal with right now, and we have to deal with it because it's in front of us every second. And this is going to be a heavy one. Right off the bat, the one thing that I was worried about, and I am still worried about because we're only like 2 minutes into this, is law enforcement is not the most popular thing right now at all. Like not even a little bit, and for good reason. We're seeing shit that I would never dream that I would see before in the real world. Disaster movies, sure. But or just like really shitty horror movies or whatever, political thrillers, but like it's happening right now. So even for me, just a little backstory for everybody why I'm doing this episode. One, I adore Nicole. I think she is just a wonderful human. She has become a very good friend of mine in a very short amount of time. But she is also part of law enforcement. And we were just talking casually one day, and Nicole, I'm not gonna divulge all of the things we were talking about, but the gist of it is that it's really awkward to be in, as much as we can be in a room of friends right now, like being amongst people you have known for a long time and shared emotions with, and good times and bad and just friendship things, and then in the same breath they say fuck the police, fuck the cops, fuck every cop. You know, people had a significant backlash to when people would tweet out not all cops, because as far and I get it, I get the spirit of it, I absolutely 100% understand. But the more I saw that, and then I talked to you, and like that shit's fairly hurtful, because you are not one of you are not one of these assholes that we see shooting peaceful on their knees protesters with beanbags and macing and shooting medics with high velocity beanbags and shit. And you know, to it's nobody wants to be painted with that wide of a brush. Everybody, I feel like a lot of people want everything to be black and white, no pun intended. They want a clear cut side, a clear cut bad guy, a clear cut good guy, because that's what we're taught. That's what we're taught to want. That's what we're taught to be aspiring to. But there's so many different shades of gray here,
Right.
all over the spectrum, shades that we can't even fucking see. So, you know, I have one of my childhood friends that I've known since I was 3 years old, is a Jersey cop, and he's a good guy. He's one of the ones that you want on your force or want in the system, that hopefully will be, because we've also seen videos of, you know, the one cop had his knee on a neck again, and his partner, after getting yelled at by people like, get your fucking knee off of his neck, and he made his partner take it off. Another cop, a woman was peacefully kneeling, and he just knocked her down as she was kneeling, and whoever I guess it was his supervisor, she came over and was just fucking berating him for it, as well as she should have.
Mhm. Yeah,
I'm also, I'm going to be taking breaks in between me talking, and Nicole's going to talk for a lot of this time, and I'll be perusing the chat and stuff, and but there's just so much, and my purpose behind this is not to give the cops a spotlight. They have plenty of it right now. It is not to make exceptions for them. It is not to say, oh well, good guys on both sides. It's not that at all. It
right.
is to highlight that, especially in the hacker community, we have law enforcement among us. We have current feds, we have ex-feds, we have current Leos, we have ex-Leos. For anybody who doesn't know, Leo, law enforcement officer.
Yeah.
And it is very hard. And so the one tweet that I put out that I got a lot of shit about was, you know, I dare you, and of course people came in like, oh, I'll tell her to go fuck herself. These people didn't even know you. I said, if you know Nicole, if you have seen her good works, if you are aware of this, and you've called her your friend before, God, I fucking dare you to like look her in the face and now tell her, because she has a badge, go fuck yourself. Like, I like how possibly can you? And then of course people will automatically retort with, well, if she really was good, she would just leave, just give it up, like just leave her job. And I was like, do you want the good ones to fucking leave? Like, do you,
Yeah.
like, any semblance, any modicum of influence that you may have, or ability to witness? You have your two eyes, you have your two ears, to witness what's going on, to be maybe a force of change or influence. You want those people to fucking leave? And then on the same token, you just on a human level, forget about all the very, very difficult things about this. What if somebody comes up to you and says, hey, you know that thing you've dedicated your life to, and dedicated your spirit, and sacrificed time and sacrificed energy and emotions, and seen people, your colleagues die, or retire, or injure? Just, if they came up to you and said, oh, just fucking give it up, things that you've been doing your whole life, that's easy, right? That's an easy way to fucking do this. So, with that said, that's the background for all of this. And I say, you know what? I'm just going to do a show. I don't care if 3 people watch it and 2 of them think I'm an asshole for doing it. That's fine. I want this to be out there, and I personally don't. And even even Nicole in our private conversations has said like, hey, you really don't have to do thank you for backing my play on this, but you didn't have to do that, and I don't want you to get. She was very concerned like don't get abusing fucking messages and emails, and I'm like, the Second Amendment runs both ways. Like, what somebody if they really want to fucking do something, then it can't stop crazy people. But if I don't back a play of a friend who I know to be a quality human being, that I know to be a good person, if I don't back my friend's play now, how can any of my other friends ever trust that I'm going to have their backs for anything else? So this is the hill that I will proverbially choose to die on. Of it is not as simple as people want it to be. So now, with that, Nicole, you had put out a tweet. What was that? Like a day or like yesterday or the other day?
Yeah.
That was kind of breaking all of this down. So I'm going to give you the floor now. I have talked for way too long already. So let's get into it.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me on. And yeah, it's a very sensitive topic. And what really kind of stuck in my head recently was as soon as I started supporting the Black Lives Matter movement and created that logo, threw it up on my timeline, I really was surprised at the number of people, or I should say sock accounts, that started DMing me, with the fuck you pig, and you're just as bad as the rest of them. If you have a badge, you're just like them. And a couple of them went a little bit overboard, to the point where I felt I should probably take myself off the radar for a little bit. So I shut my account down. And I got to thinking, I am feeling just a little of what the Black community has felt for years with just those couple of tweets. And so I started, my Twitter account back up, and I really started listening because I thought, you know what, I can either take that stance where a lot of cops are doing, where we're cops, we're not doing anything wrong, we're really out there, but I decided to listen. And when I started listening, I really started hearing the background and what was going on, and what they were feeling. And I can't fathom living my life day to day, in fear. And so I started thinking, I'm like, you know what, I'm white. I've not had any issues my entire life, personally, but without getting into details, I do have family members who have been abused by police, and they have had run-ins with the law, and they didn't go so well. That is actually one of the reasons that I became a cop, because I saw that there needed to be a change. I saw there needed to be somebody in there that was making a difference. And so, despite what everybody says, I did get into this to make a difference. And so I started there. And, a lot of people who know me, they say, oh my gosh, Nicole, we would have never guessed that you were a cop. You don't act like a cop. You don't look like a cop. This is why I got into law enforcement. And although I'm only in it right now as a volunteer officer, I can still make a difference because of my background and experience. So one of the things that I really started looking at was, okay, let's break down from beginning to end, what we can change, because we can all learn from this. We can all change, whether it's our biases personally, or whether it's to change the entire system. And I have a unique view on that. And so I really started breaking that down and going through from the very beginning, from the time you take that civil servant test, all the way through retirement. What can we change for the better? So that was what my thread, all of those tweets were about. So the first thing that I posted was that civil servant exam. And this is a really generic exam, and I'll post links in the chat of some websites you can go to see the types of questions that are on these exams. They're very, very generic. and they go through reading comprehension, memory, reasoning, problem solving, and like police situational awareness. So if you are walking down the street and you see a Black person on the other side of the street, what do you do? It's one of those where they're trying to gauge whether somebody already has preconceived biases, if they are too violent, if they would react in a more violent way than what they should be reacting. So it is meant to weed the bad ones out. The problem with this is over the years, it has gotten easier and easier and easier because for a while there were a lack of folks that candidates that wanted to become officers. So and they weren't getting the passing rate that they needed. So they said, well, let's make the exam easier so we can get more people in there. Well, great, you get more people in there, but are you getting the type of people that really need to be in there? The candidates that you trust on the street to make those split-second decisions and to make those decisions morally, ethically, and judiciously. Like, are you making the right decision for the people? Are you just reacting in a very violent way? So that would be the first thing that I would change is let's reform the entire civil service exam. Let's create it to where it reflects the type of person that we actually want to see on the street, that we want to see in a police department or a sheriff's department. So that would be the first thing that I would suggest moving forward. Let's see. The second part that I tweeted about was the academy. So when I went through the academy, it was 610 hours. My specific academy was. It varies now. It can go up to 800 hours. It is the highest that I've seen it go, which roughly equates to 6-7 months. And in my experience, you're giving somebody a gun, a badge, and a lot of power. And they've only been trained for 6 or 7 months. To me, I think that there should be a lot more involved in the academy. I think there should be more classes. And I think that whole process should be the second phase of weeding out bad candidates. In Ohio, so every state is different, there are closed academies and there are open academies. Closed academies are private academies that, say, Columbus Police Department or the State Highway Patrol have their own academies. Then there are the open academies, public academies, where anybody can enroll. All you have to do is pass a criminal background check, a physical fitness test, and a drug screen, and you can go to these academies. You don't have a job. Most people don't have a job prior to attending this academy. And so you might pass those 3 things, but that doesn't mean that you're fit to be an officer. So you can go to the academy and then you can apply to jobs later, which is what a lot of people do. I actually had a job before, but I went to an open academy or a public academy. The open academies also accept, here in Ohio, they accept the GI Bill. So you get a lot of former military that come into these academies. So closed versus open academies. So let's break down 610 hours. So of those, you have administrative classes, legal classes, human relations, which, there are bias trainings in there, civil disorder, riot formations, subject control, first aid and CPR, driving, investigations, patrol operations, firearms, traffic and crash classes, and several others. But those are some of the few. Now, what we don't get a lot of in there is how to deal with people personally.
I'm sorry, Nicole. You can continue. My dog is scratching. I'll just go ahead.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
So you don't get a lot of training on how to respond uniquely to individuals. So you get that after the academy. But in my opinion, that's not soon enough. So we have to take classes afterwards on mental health and how to deal with an autistic person, how to deal with somebody with a disability, how to deal with a suicidal individual. So we do get trainings on specific issues such as that, but we need more of that. And we specifically need more on de-escalation techniques. So we have subject control, we have less lethal, besides firearms, they do teach you that kind of stuff. But how about the verbal de-escalation? How about not even getting to the point of subject control in the first place? Um, yeah, so I see somebody just posted, Alyssa, that's a lot of stuff for 600 hours. It is, and each of those items may only be 3 hours. So you're getting a very small snippet of what you should be getting. So yeah, it definitely needs to be longer. Um, so there needs to be some changes there as well. And one of the things, so from the tech side of me, you don't get any training on how to respond to cybercrime. You don't get any training on forensics, or how do you even collect a cell phone? How do you collect a computer? So there's all kinds of stuff that needs to be changed there. But specifically, how to deal with people and how to de-escalate a situation, in my opinion, is another thing that needs to change. Um, so the next thing that we should talk about is during that academy, what kind of feedback are you getting? You should have not only review from your instructors, how did this cadet act? How did they respond to the training? Are they goofing off in class? Are they acting like this stuff doesn't matter? Peer reviews. You have your peers grade you. Do you feel you've been with this person for 6 months? Usually classes are anywhere from 20 to 40 people in a class. You get to know your academy mates very well. Sometimes you don't want to know them that well, but so that would be a huge feedback. Do you want this person standing by your side while you're on patrol? Would you want them, responding to a riot situation with you? Would you want them responding to domestic violence with you? How do you think that person would respond to those types of calls? So I think peer review would be great. One of the other things too is psychological evaluations. So you go through the academy, you get out, you either have a job already or you don't, in which case, if you do not, you're already applying to those jobs. Um, when you are applying to a position, and usually you have to again take another test. Sometimes you have to take the civil service test multiple times. Sometimes you have to take the physical evaluation multiple times. And the psych evaluation, at least here in Ohio, it is not mandatory that any agency gives you a polygraph or a psychological evaluation. Um, I 100% believe that both of those things should be mandatory for every department, every law enforcement agency, and every officer. So a psych review is very intrusive. They ask you, oh my gosh, every question that you would never want to be asked in your lifetime. It does get into racial bias. It does get into, sexual encounters. It gets into, your family history, drug use, all kinds of things. So it's definitely a very uncomfortable situation. The same for the polygraph. Oh my God, I never want to do a polygraph again. Uh, it was 3 hours in this little bitty room with the heat up to like 80 degrees. You're already nervous and sweating. I don't care if you're the most vanilla person in the world. If you've never done anything wrong in your life, if you're a nun, you're still sweating.
I'm sweating just listening to you talk. Or like this interview is making me sweat, and I haven't even had to ask any questions. Forget like a
So
polygraph, Jesus.
yeah, it was interesting. So it's definitely uncomfortable, but that's good. We need people to be uncomfortable. We need to push them out of their comfort zone so we can really tell, how that person is going to respond. Um, I also think that there needs to be a greater training period. So a lot of officers, it's agency by agency, but most offices or sheriff's departments are a year at least that you are in training mode, and you are considered on probationary period. So if you really screw up in that period, they can terminate you without having to deal with the police unions. So I do think that that's a good thing, but in a lot of cases, and I've personally seen this, you get a recruit that comes in, and maybe one of the other officers knows that recruit, and so they're always going to give them glowing reviews. So there needs to be a separation there as well, so that you can really you figure out if that person needs to be on the street or not. So a little bit of tweaking and some issues there as well. Um, and then so you need psych review, you need a polygraph. What about social media review? Um, you have to look at somebody's social media. Think about all the stuff that we as hackers in OSINT investigations find on people. That needs to happen to every officer. Hands down. I mean, you can find out so much about a person. And if you delete your social media and we found out that you deleted it, you're instantly disqualified. There's no ifs, ands, or buts, because if you're going through, deleting your account, there's probably something on there you don't want people to see. And I know several people in the academy, because at least in Ohio, a lot of offices do social media review. So I knew several cadets that were like, okay, I'm done with the academy. I'm shutting down Facebook. I'm shutting down Twitter. Like, I'm getting rid of every social media account. Well, they found out later when they were going through the hiring process that because of that, nobody believes that you don't have an account. So they would be disqualified for that, and rightfully so. Or they would put up dummy accounts, and you can tell like you've only been on there for a month or whatever. So issues there also. So I guess those would be the initial things, and I'll pause here because I know I've been talking for quite a while. If there's any questions or anything.
I mean, I have several.
Okay.
But no, they're all so. Every question that gets asked, I am going to make it a point to ask that's in the chat. But there are some immediate ones that I have.
Okay.
So first, so you are in Ohio, like you said. How different is that training from state to state? Is that federally created, or is it just by state?
It's by state. So each state has some kind of oversight committee usually. So in Ohio, the Attorney General's office oversees police training. We have the Ohio Police Officer Training Commission that oversees the academies, what classes are mandatory. Academies can add classes or add, additional items, which is why you get the variation in hours. So most states do have one centralized oversight committee, though. But training can vary from state to state.
Among cops, among law enforcement, do you all kind of through the rumor mill kind of be like, do you guys know which state sucks worse than the other ones? And God, I don't even want to be a cop in this state. Or like, do you internally as humans also have that judgment of like, holy shit, I can't believe the lack of or how good the state is, one or the other?
Yeah. So in a lot of the channels that I'm in, California comes up a lot because, they have either really stringent laws or their laws are really lax. So, for example, the forensic officers that I know that are in California, it is near impossible for them to get a hold of a cell phone or a computer or any type of social media account. So yeah, you definitely do know which states are harder than others. The same for academies. Like, before you enroll in academy, which academy is harder and which are easier to pass. Now, the good thing about that is most officers will purposely go to the harder academies because they know they're going to get better training. So that is at least a plus side on that.
In relation to Ohio's 600 hours, is that statewide, by the way? Does that vary by precinct or is it statewide 600 hours?
It's statewide. There's a
Statewide.
minimum statewide. Mhm.
Comparatively, what states have way less than that? And like, do you know who has the most like hours
Um,
of training?
I don't know as far as hours go. I would assume that New York is probably one of the harder ones. Um, I know LAPD, NYPD, they have their own police academies, and they're pretty difficult. So I don't know the hours on that though.
Um, so, I mean, so like, I assume it could go lower, like other places. Like, have you heard of other places going considerably lower than that?
6 months is pretty much the minimum, but the hours could be lower. Yeah, absolutely. I haven't heard of anything dropping, under, I would say, 500. And over the years, so it used to be that you didn't have to go to a police academy. I mean, think about back in the day. You could actually become an officer and be put on the street before you ever went through the police academy. So there are a lot of old school cops who had never ever gone through any type of academy, or it was very limited, or it was just on the job training, like their fellow officers trained them. So it has gotten more stringent over the years, but I think we can definitely do better and keep going.
So, following up, and whenever you have next points to get to, be like, okay, well, I was done with your questions. Now I'm going to talk again. Let me know. I don't
Okay.
want to steamroll, but I just have a whole bunch coming, and there's a bunch in the chat too.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, so, you just said, some of the older cops on the force might not have ever been to a right, like they could have never been to a modern training. Like they're not forced to be like, hey, you've been on the force for 30 years, you're not done yet, get back in class.
Right. So I would say most of those officers are actually retired by now. Um, I would say the older crowd in the police community now has at least been through, 300 or 400 hours of training. So we're getting better as we go. But that's one of the things too that I want to talk about is the age of officers and you. Um, how do I put this without sounding terrible? Uh,
Oh no, you're
so
on the right show for being terrible. Go right ahead.
yeah, you do have those old school officers who do think old fashioned, and that seems to be the biggest issue. So one of the things that so I did public corruption, law enforcement and public corruption. So I was on the FBI Public Corruption Task Force. I took down corrupt politicians. I took down corrupt cops. I took down corrupt sheriffs. Um, so I definitely have seen a whole gamut. Doing training on public corruption and fraud, there was kind of a saying that I used to walk through with everybody, which was when you think of corruption, think of having a vase full of water, and then think of having like a honeycomb, multiple little segmented compartments over here. And then take food coloring and take one drop and drop it into the large vase. When you take that food coloring and drop it in the vase, it spreads and it spreads and it spreads until the entire vase and all of the water is tainted, it's colored. Then you go over here and you drop it into the segmented area. You're only going to hit one or two of those honeycombs, those segments. And that's how I think of corruption. So when we think of changing racism and making a huge difference in this, um, you have to start from the top down, and it has to start with the leaders. It has to start with the sheriffs. It has to start with the police chiefs, and it starts with all of us, right? We can control everything that's around us. So if I am a police chief or if I'm a sheriff, I control that food coloring being spread underneath me. And so we as citizens have to get to the top. So one of the action items, and I'll just go ahead and say it now, is you have to vote these people out of office. Your vote counts. Those county sheriffs are voted in. You vote for them. Politicians who elect the police chiefs are voted into office. I can't stress this enough. So, yes, politicians are corrupt. Yes, there are corrupt sheriffs. Yes, there are corrupt police chiefs. We have to do our job to get those people out of office, because that only spreads corruption, and that only spreads, we're talking about racism here. If you have a racist police chief or a racist sheriff or a sergeant, that's only going to spread among officers. It's only going to spread among the people that are around you. Think about at work. If you have a racist boss, that's only going to spread among the team. And it takes every single one of us to stop that. So vote, definitely report any kind of incidents, not only in law enforcement, but at your office. Like, there's a lot we can do, but that's one of the things that I wanted to point out.
So actually, that actually kind of touches on one of the first questions that we had from Yoink and Boink. I fucking love that name. Question: what kind of action can citizens take? What kind of action can citizens take to push for the changes that you're talking about? I imagine this would vary by state. Does it start? And you kind of just mentioned it, by voting out at city, county, state, or federal level.
Right.
Of those levels mentioned, like, what do you think is most critical?
The average citizen is not dealing with federal law enforcement. I mean, it's very rare that we're going to run into the FBI, Secret Service, DEA, somebody like that. So it starts at the local level. You and when you go to vote, you're voting for all of the above, but you can really make the change in your community. So it's your police chief, it's your county sheriff, it's your mayor, it's your governor that makes the biggest difference in all of this. So definitely, you pay attention, you ask those tough questions, go to your city council meetings, ask for a meeting with the police chief, ask for a meeting with the sheriff, organize a community, get a community organization together and ask if you can sit down and talk to the police chief, talk to the sheriff. I know, at least around here, if you ask for a meeting, they will definitely meet with you. If you're going to go in and scream and yell and all that, you're not going to get anywhere. But if you're going to sit down and have a civil conversation, and ask them those tough questions, that's where it starts. And it can be on social media. A lot of police chiefs, my county sheriff happens to be, very, very popular on Twitter and Facebook, and he's on all social media. So if you tweet at him or you ask him questions, he's going to respond.
Um, I actually had a question, but I had to. Discord messed me up. Um, I guess for and oh, that's what I meant. I think for me, just interjecting my own personal thing in here, I have never been more aware, like hyper aware of the importance of not only like local elections, local government, local political infrastructure, but also hyper aware of how each state can like I've never been more aware of the separation between or lack of separation between federal level and state level on a lot of fronts. That is biting us in the ass. On a lot of fronts, that's actually doing a lot of good, because when you have people in the federal government that are fuckwits, and then the states can be like, well, no, we know, fuck off, we're gonna go do our own thing, like we know what we're doing. So I am now hyper aware of that. I mean, I'm almost 40 years old. I never really took it seriously of like showing up to those meetings, right? Showing up to the meetings of our local, and then I've never put roots down enough to really care or consider how important it is. There was another question. Oh, leading right from this. And we can hop back and forth. I'm just a natural flow of questions here. So we talked about how things are fucked up. We talked about how things can be changed, where we can start on a civilian level, on a law enforcement level. A question for you, Nicole. Behind closed doors, this comes from Pseudo Social Club on Twitch. Do most cops want to change? Do they want to fight that change? are they like, we have our thing and this is how we're going to do it, or are they starting to see, at least in your sphere, right? I know you can't speak for law enforcement everywhere, and it's as wide and deep of changes in attitudes and stuff from state to state, I imagine. In your experience, do most cops see that this is a fucking problem, and do they want this change? Are they hamstrung to do it? Are they afraid of speaking up, just like you talked about the mental health part of it?
Yeah, so I would say all of the above, and it depends on the department. So, luckily I was around a lot of cops who were very aware, and you um, never really had an issue. We did see it. I mean, of course, you see it. It's one of my pet peeves lately that's made me so angry is seeing all these cops on social media say, "I don't know what you're talking about. I've never seen racism." Bullshit. If you're in law
So
enforcement,
cringy. Oh, that was so awful.
infuriates me. So you do see it, and it's up to you to stand up to those people. Um, I will share a story without divulging, names because she wouldn't want me to. But my one of my law enforcement partners, she ended up moving to another state. Um, it was probably her first month on the job with this other department, and she pulled somebody over, speeding. It was a simple traffic stop, no big deal. The guy got out and you tried to fight with her, was actively trying to take her weapon from her, and so she had to fight. And he ended up taking off on foot. Foot pursuit ensued, and then one of her partners came to back her up, another female cop. And this female cop, after they got him down, handcuffed him and everything, female cop basically said, "Hey, you need to go get something in the cruiser." And I forget what it was that she told her to go get, but my friend was like, "I don't know why, but okay." As soon as she turned around, she said she heard and the other female cop was beating the crap out of this guy who's handcuffed and on the ground. She immediately had to turn around and like yank this officer off of this guy. And long story short, she ended up having to testify against this lady. This officer is now in jail. She was prosecuted successfully for that. Um, but the issue that she now has is that all of the other officers in that department um, won't work with her. They call her a snitch. They're saying, she did the wrong thing, to the point where she's probably going to have to move departments. The attorney general's office in that state did the right thing. They did take action. They did arrest that officer. She was successfully prosecuted. Like I said, she's in jail or prison right now for that. But we have to change the stigma of you turning on your own. The thin blue line is not meant to back another officer when they're doing illegal activities. The thin blue line is supposed to be there to protect an officer when you're in a struggling situation, not to defend illegal actions. And that's another pet peeve. I'm just very adamant about that. It's complete BS. So no, you shouldn't defend just because it's another officer. Absolutely not. And I'm really sad for her that she's had to go through this, unfortunately. So it varies state by state, like you said. I mean, there are some agencies that they would have been like, "What the hell, man? Like, get out! Like, we don't want you in this department. You are bad for all of us." And then, of course, there's agencies like where she's at and where she's in
What
that are making her out to be the bad guy. So it does vary, unfortunately. And like,
there's so many good questions in the chat. I just have
yeah, go ahead.
no,
Yep.
no, no. Well, this one's mine, and then because my show, haha. Um, just trying to get into the psychology of it. What do you think? And again, Nicole is not like speaking for people. I'm not it's. I'm just asking her opinion as both a law enforcement officer and a human being. When I look at a video like I saw today of somebody, a medic, giving medical aid to somebody who had been injured, and then those riot cops or whoever they are up and they just start firing beanbags at the people trying to deliver aid. If you go as a law enforcement officer through this training, even if, like, to me 600 hours sounds like a lot. It's probably not, but it sounds like a lot to me. If you go through 600, 800, 1,000, whatever it is, what makes somebody go through all of that training, and what had motivated them to go through that before, that now all of a sudden they are shooting medics? Like, what do you think that is?
First of all, I'm just absolutely outraged at those videos. There's no excuse for that whatsoever. Um, Shooting somebody in the face, there are distances when you go through training. The taser, pepper spray, less lethal. Those suckers hurt. I mean, we've all seen the videos. Obviously, I mean they're huge. Whether it's a beanbag round or a rubber bullet, they're awful. So no, it's not acceptable. And so there's a couple issues here that I want to touch on that are a little bit sensitive. So on one hand, you have this military style indoctrination of officers where it's an us versus them mentality that's fed. And especially in a riot situation, tensions are increased. Everybody's heightened awareness. Everybody's scared. Whether officers want to admit it or not, those situations are freaking scary. We've seen the videos of officers being punched in the back of the head. I mean, a Las Vegas officer was shot in the back of the head. So we've all seen those videos. So you have on one side the officers that are terrified for their life, and on the other side you have the rioters that are terrified, or the protesters that are terrified for their lives. So it's already a heightened situation, and that's where I'm saying that de-escalation has to come into play. You have to be able to stand there, separate yourself from the emotion, separate yourself from what's going on around you, and you process this responsibly. Um, there's just absolutely no excuse. I can't even.
That, like, you, like, not even you as a law enforcement can get in the headspace of somebody that would see somebody kneeling and be like, "Hey, here's some mace."
Right. No. I can say that a lot of times in their radio, their sergeant, their chief, their whatever, they're taking orders from people, unfortunately. But that doesn't mean that they have to act on those. Um, so I'm not saying that, it's hard. It's a really hard conversation to have, but it's unacceptable. I don't know any other way to say it.
There was
I can't get in that headspace because
Yeah.
there's no way I can stand there and shoot somebody or mace somebody that isn't being physically violent back to me. I don't care if you say there's a curfew. I don't care if you say, my sergeant told me I have to mace this entire crowd. Like, I don't understand.
So related to that, I'm trying to find common threads so we don't hop back and forth. Another one from Yoink and Boink. I have had this question for a while and not have a chance to place to ask it. What ability, talking about you not being able to get into the headspace of doing that, what ability do Leos have to not do something, like not go out in front in riot gear or at one of the protests or something that might go against what they believed was their oath or their deep-rooted morals? Can they? Because we've seen National Guard, we've seen other enforcement officers kneeling with protesters. We've seen the empathy, right? It's few and far in between. At least what the media show. Listen, there's always media bias and stuff. Like, so I don't want to paint too wide a brush, with too wide a brush on that. But what ability do cops have to say, I'm not fucking doing that, this is wrong? Or is it that deep systemic, like, this is their career and they're fucked if they do that, and that they have, like, what's their ability to say, no, I'm not doing that?
Um, yeah, if you say no, you're going to be written up. So uh, you you could call off work. If you have sick leave, you could take sick leave, but that only goes so long, and unfortunately, officers don't get that much leave time. Um, You could, take a spot, off to the side somewhere. You could, put yourself in a position that is off to the side. Um, you really can't say no, unfortunately. You can question. You can say, I really don't think this is a good idea. Let's do it another way, which is what I think, needs to happen, and some situation is happening. I've seen a couple videos lately where the officers just absolutely said no. One where they were blatantly told, you will not kneel. And the entire unit that was right there in the middle of the demonstration knelt. So there are officers that are starting to take a stand. However, you can only get so many write-ups, or so many uh, you personnel file complaints before you are either turned over to internal affairs, you're fired, terminated, you have to go through another probationary period. So there's a lot of issues there.
There are a lot of people that will say, and that have said to me after some of my tweets in support of cops like you, of saying, well, just fucking quit, just fucking like, and I can't on I've already I said this at the opening of, and then what, and then what they're gonna have, like, these are difficult decisions.
Yeah.
Like, it is easy for somebody to impose or suggest their own moral compass on somebody else and say, well, just do this. And I that's the thing I hate the most about this. Of, yes, thank you, Archewis, quitting doesn't fix anything.
No.
Resigning doesn't fix anything. So that's what I can't understand. Go go Going away from that just for one second, because there were two similar questions that I wanted to ask that were posed in chat, both from Mr. Archwisp, who was gracious enough to let me use his music for this stream, which I really appreciate, but also from DNS Princess. Uh, Going to those methods of control, going to those, all right, I've had, so, I can only stand up so much, and I have a family to feed, and now I have to toe this line, and forget about the moral and ethical turmoil those people might be going through. Why do you think, and this was kind of, I think this is maybe a generalization, but I'm going to go with it anyway. Why do you think that physical altercation, why do you think that physical violence, to subdue somebody rather than proper de-escalation, is a go-to? Or is it like, that makes an assumption that that is the go-to for all these bad cops? Like, why is it automatically, like, when you see videos of, and I can't put myself in their position. I'm not a cop. I'm not dealing with strangers every day. Why is that? Why do they automatically assume I'm going to beat the shit out of this person to subdue them? Is that human? Is that animal human nature? Or is that a learned thing? Like, why do you think that is?
Okay, so when we're in the academy, there is a use of force escalation chart. So if somebody's using a knife, what do you use? If somebody's using a firearm, you use the next thing. So there is an escalation of force chart that is taught. So some of that is learned, um, but a lot of the videos that we're seeing, the use of force isn't justified. So the way that they teach it in the academy is you have to do the next level of force to subdue the person. So if somebody's coming at you with a knife that can potentially stab you and kill you, because we all know knives, or maybe you don't know, um, knives go through vests. And so, if somebody's coming at you with a knife, that is definitely a lethal situation. So you're going to use lethal force. If somebody is coming at you with their fists, or a baseball bat, what level are you going to use? So some of that is learned. However, you have to read the situation and the psychology behind reading the situation, and whether or not you believe that you can de-escalate that. So we've all seen the movies and the videos where the hero cop comes in, they take their gun off, and they go in and they de-escalate the situation just verbally. I like to say that that would happen more often than not. Um, but again, most of us aren't trained in that. I did go through training for that, so I do know how to use verbal techniques, but a lot don't. That's considered a specialty training that, depending on what your job is, they may send you to it, may not. So some of it is learned, unfortunately.
Um, that's the other one that I wanted to hit, and then I'll let you get back on your trains of thought because I think I derailed from you so much. But going way back to, it feels like we've talked for 3 hours. DNS Princess had asked, you made the great analogy of the vase versus the honeycomb, right?
Mhm.
And I think you kind of hit on it by talking about local elections and things like that. But once the die is in, how do you get it out? Like once that like because once the dye is in, it's in, and there's no root. Like you can't chop a root off like the dye is in the water. How do
Right.
you how do you filter it? How do you clean it out?
That is a great segue into my next point, actually,
Sweet.
which are police unions. Um, uh, I worked in the public sector. I understand more than most the need for a police union because you have city council members or county commissioners that do not want to give money to a police force for simple things like vests. Um, some departments you actually have to buy your own vest to wear to protect yourself, which is completely unacceptable. So if they can find a way to cut money, they're going to. So police unions are necessary in order to ensure that not only teachers, firefighters, police officers, there's unions for almost every industry. They're set up to ensure that those individuals are protected and are safe in their job. So they have all the protective gear that they need. They're in a safe environment. There's not black mold growing in the walls, that kind of thing. However, on the flip side, we've all seen the police union. This happens, teachers union as well, where you can't fire a terrible employee no matter how hard you try. It has to get to that criminal level. It has to get to some sort of egregious violation of policy before that individual can either then be, usually they're stuck on a desk job instead of patrolling the streets, but they're still in the office and they're still there, still, that die that's in there. So one of the other points that I wanted to make is we have to change police unions to where if you are getting write up after write up, if you're getting calls and complaints constantly for uses of force or just being a jackass, then that needs to, the police chief, your sergeant, whoever needs to have the ability to fire that person. It's unacceptable to have those people just stuck on a desk job or still be allowed to be in that office and in that agency. Kick their asses out. Like, I'm absolutely tired of hearing about these crap cops that get to stay. The same with teachers. We've all heard of that teacher that literally just sits at their desk and does nothing because they don't care because it's their last year before retirement. Same thing.
How how ubiquitous is that feeling with other cops? Because like when you talk about teachers, like unions are still a third rail. For I mean,
Yeah.
I mean unions across the board. My mom was a Teamster for 30 years, so
Mhm.
like unions are like talking about social security benefits or gay marriage, whatever. Those are just one of those very electrified fucking rails. What's the feeling when you as a Leo start talking about fucking unions? God damn it! Like, what kind of do you get agreement among other law enforcement? Do you get pushback going? I wouldn't talk about that. Unions are good. Um,
Yeah. So, it's a double-edged sword. I happen to be great friends with the past president of the FOP for the entire nation. He lives here in Ohio. He's a wonderful friend of mine. So, I understand both sides of that coin. However, us as officers, we know who those shit cops are, and we don't want them in our agency anymore than the citizens want them in the agency. So I do think that That's why they get put on the crap jobs and they get put on desk duty or demoted. So at least there's a little sense of morale that comes back because you don't get to play ball with the rest of us. But it still has to change. It still has to be where we can fire these people. They don't need to be an officer. They don't need to have a badge. They don't need to have a gun or any authority whatsoever. And I'll even take that one step further. If you are fired from an agency for complaints, it could be racial complaints, it can be, use of force, it can be whatever. I say, just like when I would prosecute a corrupt public servant, if they were prosecuted, they were never allowed to hold a public office again. And I would say the same thing for cops. If you are fired from one agency, you cannot then go down the street to the next agency and get hired on. You're done, period. There should be, a red letter in your file. You are not hireable. Go find another job.
Yeah, and you actually just answered Coleman's question because Coleman came in and said, "Love Coleman. It's just fucking adorable. What about police that do get?" He said about do get fired that just end up getting hired in a nearby jurisdiction. He mentioned, I guess, in Cincinnati, a couple of those responsible for high-profile deaths had that happen. Like they just get hired again. Yeah, like it's got to be. And I can't. Why do you think that? And this is, you don't have to give expert fucking testimony on this, but just chatting. Why do you think that? Like, who sees a jacket of somebody and says, you were probably responsible for that murder, and you roughed up somebody who was already handcuffed, and now they're dead? Come on. Why?
Right. For the life of me, I can't answer that question.
How?
It's stupid. Why would you do that? Why would you put your agency at risk for somebody's butt that doesn't matter? But I will say there are a lot of agencies that are very small. So you could have a village that has 1,000 people in it, who may have a police force of 3 officers and then the chief. So maybe they are having a hard time finding somebody that wants to be a part of a really small agency or department, and they can't find somebody who they can pay pennies to, because pay in a lot of these are terrible as well. So they hire that guy because he has experience, and maybe they think because it's a little village, he's not going to get into anything. Yeah. I don't know.
There was also, yeah. Again, I usually hate going backwards, but this is so much good stuff. I'm going to be it's not going to be linear, obviously. Going back a little bit for those cops that have gotten fired or busted, but they get hired elsewhere. What going back to whatever that cop did, we were talking a little bit about why the go-to is physical violence for a lot of these cops that you see. And then you talked about the escalation of, like, if they have a knife, you bring a gun. If they have a gun, you bring a tank, blah, 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 blah. Tale as old as time, right? But what, and this comes from both Archwisp and DNS Princess. Have you known people, have you just, or heard through the grapevine or whatever, or like, yo, that cop, like, gave that fucking guy a concussion or beat the shit out of him after he was seated with his hands behind his back? Like, what do you think causes somebody to do that? Like, is it the stress of the job? Is it the whole mental thing? Is it that they don't get screened? Like, why unarmed people that are subdued already, they ain't fucking going anywhere?
Yeah. So there's multiple things here, right? So I don't know if anybody watches live PD on Friday and Saturday, but
I've heard it's good, but I haven't seen it.
I love it. But if you watch that, you can even see. So when you're on an intense call, so it can be a domestic violence, it can be a car chase, foot pursuit. Your adrenaline, you have to think you're going from 0, sitting in your car, drinking coffee. Your computer terminal goes off and says, code 3, you need to be at such and such place in 2 minutes. There's an active fight. There's an active shooter. There's whatever. Your adrenaline immediately goes from 0 to 100. It's through the roof. And you're flying to this call. You're getting amped up. You're like, oh my God, thinking of a million things. What do I do? What if this person is here or here? I mean, I can't even describe the amount of crap that goes through your head when you're responding to something like this. You get to this call and either you're involved in this call or sometimes it's already over by the time you get there, but your adrenaline is still up here or up here. And then all of a sudden, what do you do with that adrenaline? So a lot of times it's a rage factor where you have all that adrenaline and it's just, I need to get it out somehow and I don't know how. So that's where you come into the coping mechanisms that need to be taught. How do I de-escalate myself? Not only the situation, how do I de-escalate myself? And I can tell you that's actually one of the leading causes of police death is heart attacks due to the adrenaline going up and down in your heart rate and all of that. So, that does affect officers as well. But it is the adrenaline rush. It is, people are angry. So think about if you're going to a call and it's domestic violence, but it's against a child, God forbid. And you get there and you're already amped up and you see that this guy just beat the crap out of his 5-year-old kid. And you see this kid, you think of yourself as a human being, just sitting here, I want to beat the crap out of the guy, right? But you have to learn to cope with that. And sometimes officers can't, the emotion gets involved. We see day in and day out, we see the absolute worst in people. We're never called to good situations. We're called to every bad situation you can imagine. I mean, I've watched people die. I've pulled dead kids out of ponds. I've, had to watch child pornography, to make a case. We see the absolute worst, and you have to learn how to de-escalate yourself and how to mentally cope, which is, a great segment into one of the other things that, I brought up is that the mental health of this job. We don't have enough money to buy vests. How in the world are we going to afford to send all these officers to therapy? There has to be a law that's passed. There has to be something, that is passed that says it is mandatory for an officer at least once a month, if not more, to go see a psychologist. We have to break that stigma because, you think about cops, you think about these, type A, I'm better and I don't cry and, I'm Mr. Tough Guy. You're not going to get that guy or that girl to go to a psychologist. You're just not. It's a stigma. And we have to break that stigma. We're so good in the hacker community about talking about mental health. That needs to happen in the law enforcement community as well. And we try. I mean, there are umpteen officers that are killed every day from suicide because they don't know how to react. They don't know how to cope. And they don't have the money most of the time to either fund themselves to go to a psychologist. And, the department shrink is required to report. In some instances, you can lose your job if they deem you unfit to be on the street. If you go to a psychologist, they will pull your gun and your badge. And so a lot of guys are terrified. Oh my God, if I go to this psychologist, I'm going to lose my job. But they don't think about the fact that they're going to not only possibly harm themselves, they're going to hurt somebody else in the process. So there has to be a whole reform around mental health and coping mechanisms and going to a psychologist.
Who are the ones? Who are the ones making the call for police departments and precincts of saying, we could get therapists and we could put that on the budget and we could send them, but we really want this tactical ATV, so let's riot up. We're gonna spend on it. Like who is the one making that call of instead of this, we're gonna militarize ourselves instead of getting therapy for people?
Yeah, so there's a couple different reasons why that happens. One, funding typically is not there. The police department is the last place that a lot of county commissioners think about or city council members think about to spend their money. They want their lush offices. They want, all the bells and whistles. So that's the last place you're going to think of. That and IT department in a city, whole nother conversation. But so they're not spending the money on that. Police departments barely have, like I said, enough money Some. Now, there are some agencies that have way more money than they can ever possibly need and have every toy imaginable. Let's, separate those extreme ends out. Let's just talk about the norm for a second. They're not going to spend the money on mental health because they need to buy vests, or they need to buy, firearms, or they need to buy something that is mandatory for the job. Cruisers. We've all seen those hoopty cruisers that are driving down the street that shouldn't be on the street at all, and so they can barely buy new cars, buy new vests, whatever. So mental health is the last thing on their list to spend money on, unfortunately. I do think in this case, I am not one for more laws. I actually think we need to erase a bunch of laws on the books, which is another segment of this. But it's going to have to come from the state level or the federal level down, that makes it mandatory for that to happen. But with all things, there's a lot of things that I'm talking about tonight that is going to cost money. So we're going to have to find money somewhere in the budget, in the state budget, federal budget, wherever it comes from, to fund all this stuff. You're going to have to cut somewhere. So I think it's going to have to be, the police chief makes the decision, the sheriff makes the decision, or it's going to have to be mandated.
Right, because it's really easy to want to pay for these things with good intentions. It's really easy for somebody to be like, hey, what's this fucking Amazon? Jeff Bezos has $8 billion. Let's get him to pay for it. Like, it is easy to just be like, here is the moral high ground, and that in and of itself should be justification to pay for this. You mentioned two roles. I forget the one because you literally just said it, but the one is county commissioner, of being the one with the purse strings. Is a county commissioner electable, or are they appointed?
They are electable. So you can
So,
elect county commissioners in. You can go meet with your county commissioners. You can go to county commissioners meetings and get right up in front of the entire room and talk and ask questions. Same with city council members.
city council,
So
that was the other role that you had mentioned. Yeah.
So each city has a council. You may have a village council as well. So it depends on your jurisdiction. But then here in Ohio, we have village, we have city, and we also have county commissioners. And you can go to every one of their public meetings. They're required to be public by law. And so you can go in as a citizen. You have every right to be there, and you can go ask questions. And then, just start there. You make your voices heard. We're doing such a good job of making our voices heard. Now let's make our voices heard to the right people.
Right. That's it, and it's one of those things that, like, this is still, when you take out the projecting and you take out the should and the hope, and just try to clear it out of your head and realize that these are machines, and these machines have cogs, and certain parts are more important than the other ones that are responsible for the other ones working or breaking, and that there is a process to that. But that's why I wanted to make that point, that commissioners are electable, and it goes all the way back to the beginning, an hour and a half ago, when we first started talking about going to those. They're so important. I used to think that they were a joke or nobody would matter, but when
Right.
you have one voice speaking up, and then somebody else that agrees, and somebody else that agrees, and then say, hey, where were you 10 assholes last meeting? We want to hear, because you bitched at the barbecue in my backyard about this. Why don't you show up at that fucking meeting and have your
Right.
voices heard too?
Right. And just keep in mind that sometimes the agenda for the meeting is set like a week or two in advance. You might have to email somebody. Usually, if you go on your city website or your county website, you can request to speak. A lot of times you do have to be put on the agenda. You will have to say what you're going to talk about. Again, just be respectable. You're not going to change anything if you go in kicking, screaming, causing a scene. You're not going to help anybody. So, logic, reasoning, statistics, which let's talk about that for a second. So in these public meetings, all of these offices are public. Everything is transparent. You can request and do public records requests for traffic stops. You can ask. So some agencies, the sheriff's office that I was on, every traffic stop or interaction that we have with a person, we have to give a code. And I'm drawing a blank on the name of the code right now, but so say I do a traffic stop on you, Danny. I would have to say,
Highly likely.
I would have to say, okay, clear stop, warning for speed to a WMA, which is white male adult.
2 out of 3.
The next
Sure.
one, black female juvenile. So there are codes that you have to give when you're on stops. Departments do this, and it's not every department. So this is the FBI that oversees this, actually. And it's to prevent cops from being racist and corrupt. So if you get one officer that is constantly stopping, black people or white people or Mexicans or whatever it may be, whatever racial profile they're stopping, and that's all they're stopping, then the FBI comes in every year. They gather all these stats and they look per officer. Are you spread across the board, or are you leaning left or right, or where are you at? Is there some reason that you're there? And then they will do an investigation into an officer if those stats are not right. But you as a citizen have access to that. You can ask for anything that you want in a public office. Obviously, you can't ask for an investigative file. They're not going to give you that. But you can ask for your city council meeting minutes. Most of the time, they're online. Do your research. You can ask for the public records of specific officers, and if they have stuff in their personnel jackets, you can request emails. You can request like I said, meeting minutes for city council, for county commissioners. Yeah, there's a whole lot of stuff you can do as a citizen to request, because we're trying to be transparent in public government, right? That's a big push right now. So you can go in and you can request all this stuff.
And I imagine these things, these changes that we want. I mean, we've been fighting for it for so, like, these are just so old conversations, and they take so long, and then things change again, and then policies change again, and workflows change again. Like, it's so hard to keep up with all of these things, but somebody has to have the wherewithal to do it.
Right.
But yeah, starting at that local level. So what else in your notes did you have that you wanted to talk about?
Oh gosh. Yeah, so we were talking about a call to action earlier, and what we can do. So if there are any psychologists on here, I don't know any personally, but if you are a psychologist, we each have unique skills. If you're great at OSINT, volunteer your time. They might not be able to afford it. If we want change, let's volunteer to help change that. So you go talk to the police chief and say, hey, look, I have this really unique skill. I'm great at OSINT investigations. Here's what I can do. If you want, clear me, do a background check on me, which is probably what they'll have to do to you, interview you, whatever, to become a volunteer. There are volunteer citizens that drive around in police cars. They will actually, swear you in as a volunteer. And you can go out on the streets and help, citizens that are broke down, and help them change tires. There are citizen academies. You can sign up to go through a mini police academy with your local jurisdiction. So if you live in a city, if you have a sheriff's department or office that has a citizens academy, sign up. See what they do. You get to do ride-alongs. You get to see the police department. You meet the officers. Change starts when you start asking questions. So go in, see what they're seeing, and see what you can change possibly, and then start from there. So there's all sorts of things that you can do. Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, like, whatever, like, because right now, like, we're just going with whatever we got now. So whatever you wanted to bring up from that thread, or
So,
whatever, man.
yeah, so we couple different things. So let's talk about specialties and rotations, because that came up on my thread too. Somebody said that we need to rotate officers through different specialized departments. So like the drug unit, or SVU, or forensics, or gang unit, traffic unit, intelligence. I mean, there's all kinds of special departments that officers can be involved in. A lot of times agencies say that there is rotation. There's not. So, for example, forensics. I know, especially the officers who work, child crimes, they're supposed to be rotated out like every 2 years, just because of the mental drain, and you can imagine the psychological ramifications of working on a unit like that for year after year. They're supposed to be rotated out. Unfortunately, they're not, because it's such a highly specialized area. Same with digital forensics. If you think you send somebody through all of this training, you don't want to rotate them out after 2 years, because they're just now learning in most instances after 2 years. Think about the learning curve at your job. How many years did it take you to get comfortable to where you're at? Usually it's well over a year, 2 years. So you it rotations sound great in theory. They don't necessarily work though. So we have to learn how to keep those specialized people where they need to be, but also make sure that we're giving them, like I said, the mental health aspect of those jobs. Um, and then another thing I want to talk about is quotas. Nobody likes to think that there are quotas in policing, right? And then proactive policing. We all talk about community policing, and what is that? What does that even mean? What is community policing? Because aren't you supposed to be a member of the community as a police officer in the first place? So what the heck does that mean? In a lot of instances, it can mean, your dare officer, or you go around and go to each business and walk your business area and talk to the shop owners. That is what true community policing is supposed to be. You getting to know your community. Um, but then there's also proactive policing. And what has happened is it's changed over the years from what is meant to be community policing at the true sense to this, oh, hey, if we stop 100 cars this month, then our budget goes up because we're getting, city funds for those tickets. So then you've got a lot of police departments, and I've actually prosecuted some of them, that have a quota for their officers to go out and stop so many cars a day or so many cars a month or whatever, because they know that they need X amount of dollars from those traffic tickets to fund the police chief's salary, or fund 5 officers instead of 3 officers. So we've turned in to, unfortunately, a force that is proactively policing, which is going out and finding problems. So I have a huge issue with this, because at the very core of law enforcement, we're not meant to be a punisher. We are not meant to be a bully. We are meant to go out and educate, inform, and reverse bad behaviors. That doesn't mean going out and giving 100 tickets a day for somebody who's going 5 miles and over the speed limit. There's an education factor there. So we really need to get back to where we're not actively seeking out, people or events as law enforcement officers. We need to take a step back and just respond to active threats. And that's going to be really hard for a lot of agencies, because so many officers, it's ingrained in them, like, let's go out and find something. What can I get into? Because there is that adrenaline rush, and there is that sense of desire to go out and find crime. Not necessarily that they're doing it to be malicious, but that isn't what policing should be. Again, we need to go back. We need to get back. Think of Andy Taylor days, and um, you know uh, real true community policing. Get to know your community, and the same goes for all of us. I mean, if we see an officer sitting at a restaurant or whatever, go up and say hi. Granted, right now might not be the best time to do that. Let's let stuff die off a little bit, because everybody's on edge. So if you go up and bum rush a police officer right now, it's probably going to scare them a little bit. They're all on edge. They're nervous. So just make sure that you're approaching cautiously or slowly, and that your hands are where they can see them, so that everybody's less tense in that situation. But yeah, make yourself known. Go out and, like I said, talk to folks.
God, there's so much. There's so much to cover. There's so much to cover. I don't know. Somebody just without shared morality, law. Oh,
Um,
somebody in the chat said without shared morality, law enforcement struggles. Thoughts?
I'm not quite sure what that means.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I guess they're making a statement and want your opinion on that statement that for law enforcement to succeed, there must be a shared morality in the department, or like one thing that all of them believe
Yeah,
and that will unite them. I guess that's what I'm reading into it, Pawn, but maybe not.
yeah, I think you're probably right. Um, so yeah, there does have to be a shared morality, and I was fortunate to be on a department where we all prayed before we went out. That was just something that we did, whether you believed in prayer or not. Everybody joined in. Um, you It could be different prayer. Everybody has different religions, so it was different every night. But it was something that was basically meant to unify everybody that was there, to say, look, let's go do the right thing. Let's make sure that we have our head on straight, that morals and ethics and all of that is in the forefront of what we're doing. And um, you know I don't know, I think he's correct in that, or they are correct. But yeah, it looks
Yeah, somebody else, the user, somebody else asked, and I don't know where this came from. Maybe it's something Nicole said and I missed it. So, how would you want to be approached by a random person if you were at a restaurant?
Oh, okay. Because I said, don't, run up to an officer and say hi if they're in a restaurant. So,
Okay. I totally missed that. I'm sorry. Okay, that's me trying to process.
so this is a really good, actually something really good to hit on. It is not really necessarily on topic, but uh, definitely. So a couple things. Coleman, who's on here, will know. I, and even here, I have to have my back to a wall because I don't like somebody coming up behind me. All officers are like that. We're trained, to protect our weapons.
Yeah.
And somebody coming up behind us or tapping us on the shoulder behind us startles us. It makes us very uneasy. So definitely, make sure you're coming around the front of the officer. Um, Extend a hand to say, shake their hand, or to just, put your hand up, say, hi, do you have a second? Something, just get their attention before you approach them. Obviously don't run up to them or anything like that.
What's up, man?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, that's really going to, frustrate an officer. So yeah, just be normal and gentle, and don't tap them on the shoulder or come up from behind them would be my, I guess, my
And
one.
by the way, if you see once we're all out in the real world and go to a conference, do not surprise hug from behind Nicole. Although, if you do it, wait until I'm there so I can see how she flips you on your ass.
Yeah, you might actually get flipped over my shoulder,
That's
to
what I
be
want.
honest.
Well, no,
Oh,
and like so, just as an example, just, hey, is this your gun? Is what Archie said.
right. No.
My son, who's turning 5, we were at one of the local parks, just skating around the parking lot, and it's right behind one of the police stations, and there was a cop sitting in his cruiser, in one of the 4x4s or whatever. And my son loves cops. My son fucking just wants to talk to all of them. And I made sure the cop was on the phone. I made a wide circle around the front of his cruiser and waited about 6 feet back. And I'm like, "What's up, man? Can he talk to you for a second? Please don't tase me." But yeah, like I approach that like I would approach anybody, like wide berth, like get their attention, and somebody else says, Rando's trying to get tased early. No, fucking not, man. Thank God. I mean, I don't.
No, you'll wait for me. I have to be the one to tase you.
No. I know. It's yeah. Uh, I know.
He's
Um, he really wants it. Shut up, princess. God damn it. But yeah, and you know, most 9 times out of 10 cops that I've approached, and they've been with my son just to say hi and kind of see your car. They've been very, very, very sweet. Every so often you run across them, they're just like, "Hey, fuck off," whatever.
We love that. I used to keep toys and teddy bears and books and all kinds of stuff, stickers, little stick-on tattoos and everything in my trunk. And I absolutely loved when little kids would come up to me and, I sit them in the front seat and let them push the lights and sirens. And, every kid wants to, I mean, even I still like pushing lights and sirens. I
Yeah,
mean, come on.
I mean,
Um,
your trunk sounds like a really fun place to be.
yeah, all kinds of toys.
Hey, come on,
Um,
get in here.
Oh gosh, so
Um,
many comments there. But yeah, so we do like that. We love that is the fun part of our job. That's what we love doing. We hate the other stuff.
yeah.
Most of us hate the other stuff. But yeah, definitely. If you have kids, yeah.
Oh, and there was a question way since now we're getting a little bit lighter, so we don't end it on such a dire note. And yes, there will still be people that will watch this and be like, "Fuck everybody," whatever. We can't change everybody's mind. All I can do is, and all we can do, you and I, is get somebody maybe to think about it, maybe a different way. Somebody asked, "What's your favorite challenge coin that you have behind you?"
Oh, yeah. So I have lots of challenge coins. Favorite one. Oh god. All of them on the top row are probably my favorites. They are all from the Secret Service. The majority of them are from the Secret Service. Uh, the ones on the right-hand side are from current and prior jobs. One, see if I can point, that one's from the White House, threat intel group that I'm part of. And then these two are probably my favorites. The one that's shaped like Ohio, and then this one was a coin that I received that's very rare is because I taught at the Secret Service Academy. So
Nice.
yeah, those are my favorites. But I love absolutely all of them. I am a sucker for a challenge coin. So
I've got two spinning pyramids that have different slots on them that you can spin it around and see different. I don't have the cool ones like you. I do have a White House Intel one though. It's got a sloth on it. Uh,
nice.
yeah, because my buddy used to do Intel for the White House, and then he left because he's like, fuck all this. Um, but yeah, so I don't have any of I got another. I think this is a question. DEFCON 201 Live says we're late in the break. Also want to know. We were late on this broadcast, but we also want to know in that one of our co-founders is half black who works for the city that works with cops, and you have to acknowledge that a lot of times in our experience, cops do treat Caucasian people differently from brown people depending on the area and the background of that policing agency.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. So I'll touch on this, and this is absolutely a sensitive subject. And
Trying to end it on a light note. Now all of a sudden we're like, oh no.
yeah, no, this is not going to be a light note. So yes, we've seen it time and time again. I mean, you don't have to look very far in the videos to see that persons of different colors are treated differently. And a lot of times that comes with somebody's experiences in life, their preconceived biases, whether you believe that you have a bias or not, you do. And you really have to dig deep in yourself to find those. So I think one of my other tweets the other day, maybe yesterday again, or 2 days ago, was, do you yourself, treat people of color differently? Do you find yourself, if you're in a dark street in the middle of the night, and you're a female, are you going to cross the street because you see a black man walking toward you? That is a preconceived bias. Why would you cross the street? You really have to ask yourself those questions. So it depends on where you grew up. It depends on your environment. It depends on how you were raised. There's a whole lot that goes into, the whole nature nurture scenario there. So that is one of the things that we really need to dig deep on, is why we have those biases and how to break those. At the company that I work at now, we have social bias training. And it is great. I mean, they really get into the deep questions and, what are you aware of? What aren't you aware of? Do you have to turn a filter on when you're talking around a person of color, so that you don't say something that, would offend them? Do you have to alter your appearance or your attitude in any way? All of those are biases that nobody wants to touch on because none of us want to think that we're biased, right? We all want to think that we're, perfectly normal and we are treating everybody with the same, all colors with the same brush. And that's not true. We all have biases. Um, Again, whether they're known or unknown, you still have to deal with those. And so I really encourage people, even if you don't feel that you have a bias, you really need to do some training on that. Read a book. I can post some of that later, but yeah, there needs to be training across the board um, on all of this. So yeah, definitely there. None of us, I think, can say, "Oh no, there's definitely nobody treats somebody different." Yes,
Yeah, of
we
course, we
do.
all do. And anybody that says like that, it's
They're
just,
a liar.
just patently not true.
Yeah,
And whether they know it or not, whether they are only referencing as in okay, maybe they are the person that will not treat somebody different by race, but they certainly have biases. They certainly have it in other areas of life, and to say this, that you don't have biases, just
yeah,
it's foolish.
yeah. It is absolutely.
Uh,
Uh,
David Geek asks, any book that you can recommend on this, Nicole?
I do actually. Marcus J. Carey on Twitter told me to read one. He recommended it. I have not read it yet, but any book that Marcus says to read, I hands down would suggest it, and I'm not finding it right now. But I'll post it
Yeah, you'll
or I'll
have it,
tweet
and
it.
then I'll tweet it out too.
Okay.
DEFCON 201 Live also says, how about this on a light note? Because they were busting my balls for want to go on a light note. And I was like, yo, this has been heavy for fucking 90 minutes. Like, but that's fine. That's fine.
Yeah.
I am just a conduit. I'm not trying to make light of anything. But now they are playing ball. They said, tasing Danny is not a light note. We're not fucking ending on that. What was the coolest public interaction that you saw with a police officer for doing something good that wasn't crime catching related that you're really proud of?
Oh gosh. There's so many. I'll just talk about. I'll talk about one that I did. Because this really touched me on so many different levels. So I got a call to service that was a house had been broken into and ransacked, and when I got there was the sweetest little girl. She was probably 5 or 6 years old, and their house had been destroyed, and I don't know what the person was looking for. They had stolen a bunch of stuff. Most likely it was to pawn for drugs. um, but this little girl came up to me. Well, I was talking to her parents, and I see this little girl in the corner, and she's got a tear in her eye. You can tell she's scared. So I'm trying to calm the parents down so we can calm the little girl down.
And he put her in the trunk.
Yeah, put her in the trunk.
Here, there's
Um,
toys in here. Get in.
I mean, I did take her out to the trunk. She got lots of toys, but so I see this, and I said, "All right, I'll be with you in a second." So I pushed the parents aside, went over to the little girl, and started talking to her. Said, "Hi, what's your name?" Just really needed to calm her down because I don't want anybody's interaction with law enforcement, especially young kids, to be negative. That may be the first time she'd ever seen an officer. And so got her calmed down, and she finally looked up to me and she said, "They stole my boo-boo." And I said, I didn't know what that meant. And I said, "Oh, what did they steal?" She said, "They stole my boo-boo." And her mom told me it was this little toy raccoon. Littlest Pet Shop, I think, is a thing for little girls. And so it was this little raccoon, apparently. And she was adamant that they had stolen it. And I'm sure it was misplaced, but she couldn't find it. And so she equated bad guys to stealing toys. And so, of course, brought her out to the trunk, loaded her up with all kinds of stuff. But then I got the description of what that toy was and talked to my sergeant right after that call and said, "I need to go find this toy." And so I had to go to Walmart and Target and every store that was open. And of course, it was almost 10 o'clock, so everything was starting to close. Finally found that toy and, went back the next day because obviously she was already in bed that late at night. But went back and brought this little girl that toy, and just the look on her face when I handed her that toy back was priceless. And that was one of the most amazing experiences for me. I hope it was for her as well, and I hope that she remembered that. So
I'm
yeah,
not
that was.
I'm not saying that I'm gonna just like clip out the part where you said brought her out to the trunk and loaded her up and just leave it at that and use it as a soundbite from now on, but I might.
Oh no, she was not white.
Why does that matter?
Yeah.
I don't know. Um, yeah, I don't particularly know why that would matter. Um, so anyway, Nicole, anything else on your? God, you're so well prepared.
Yeah, I have notes on notes and notes. Yeah, so let me go down my list of stuff that I tweeted out the other day. Oh gosh, yeah, we went over most of this. Yeah, so I have noticed that now, for example, our Dayton mayor here in Ohio has come out and has created a 5-point checklist on how police community relations are going to change. And I'll just go over a couple of those. So number one is she wants to increase transparency in the process to report suspected police misconduct and strengthen the citizen appeal board made up of community members. So that's another thing that we can do is make up these citizen appeal boards. We do have them here in Ohio. The city of Dayton, specifically in Montgomery County, has them. And so for every police report that comes in against an officer, that is reviewed by the Citizen Appeal Board. And they make sure that whatever punishment is given is justified and that this isn't just being swept under the rug. So they're going to increase the transparency in that. She wants to assess all recent incidences in which force was used by Dayton police to look for patterns and biases, which will inform a review of police force policies. So she's going to go back, look at all of the incidents where there's a use of force, because we do have to do a use of force report. And any department has to do that. It has to be reported, and then that is reported up to the FBI, which is where they do an annual report that talks about how many police shootings, how many stabbings. Like it gives an entire breakdown. So she wants to review all those, and that's what I was talking about earlier. Review the interactions with law enforcement to see if there is a bias there, which I think is wonderful. Continue implicit bias and de-escalation trainings for all Dayton police officers. So she wants to continue it. I don't see, additional training, which I would like to see because I don't think the basic training is good enough. But she's at least saying that we need to keep going with that. The fourth point is review police recruitment, oversight, and selection processes to better identify any potential issues in new officers and increase diversity in the force. So a couple things there. What we talked about all night, the entire recruitment process is broken. Selection of candidates and from the very beginning, making sure you're choosing the right people to be on the street would solve 90% of these problems. And then diversity in the police force. So this is really difficult because it is really hard to get a diverse police force because a lot of people of color do not want to be police officers because of, either family members, calling them names if they do join the police force, or just the biases around and the stigma around being a police officer in your community. I have a close friend who's Brazilian, and she is a police officer in her community, which is primarily Latino, Brazilian background. And she gets so much slack for being an officer, even though she represents them and can make their voice heard. She gets all kinds of crap for being a police officer. So there needs to be a little bit of change there as well. Um, and then the last point that she makes is continue to deepen community engagement by rank and file officers to strengthen the relationships with the people that they serve and protect. Which again, that it's sad that that's even a point, because that's the entire reason that we're hired, right? So we shouldn't have to work to do community policing. We shouldn't have to work at that. It should be something that is done every single day. But those are her 5 points, and I don't agree with the Dayton mayor on a lot of stuff. But on this, I think she's spot on, and I want to say kudos to her for doing this. I think that's wonderful, and I hope more mayors and more governors join that movement. Right. Yeah, so that's something too. We all know local politics is corrupt. I spent years investigating it. I know more than most, and uh, so you do have to make sure that those people that are being put on the board are not being put on the board by the police chief or because they're a friend of an officer. There does have to be a separation. There should be an election in some way. And then you should absolutely make sure that they have to fill out, an ethics or a bias sheet, which basically says that you have no relation to anybody on the police department. You have no relation to anybody who elected you to that board. Um, so yeah.
Sorry, answer more questions in chat. Sorry, Alyssa, I have my muke, my muke mited. Okay, you can tell that I'm not used to doing 2 hour shows straight back to back. No, I was just echoing, Alyssa. I was echoing the question from Fava in chat that he said for that Citizens Appeal Board, great idea, but you got to make sure the right people are on it, which comes down to local elections. So that's all I did. You didn't miss anything. Trust me. I talk too much as it is. Yes, Archwist putting the right people on the boards. Yes. Because I was about to, before I had to fucking yell at somebody, I was going to say, like, yes, these are all great, good ideas, good concepts, worthy concepts. But as we all know, from anybody that's done any kind of project management, when the rubber meets the road to do these things, devil's in the details. And most times what you project a thing to be or to start will either derail or not end up quite what you want it to be. We all project. I project all the fucking time about what's going to happen, what might not happen. So just trying to plan for the eventualities and thinking those things out like we do with any project that we do in our work life. Cool. So any other things that you? I'll fucking stay on here with you all night if you want to. Anything else, other real points that you really wanted to get across? I'm really happy that we have as many people watching right now as we do, and I hope other people watch later on.
Yeah, I do want to address something. So this is not about me in any way, shape, or form. I want to make that very clear from the start. This is about helping forward the cause. Let's get rid of racism. Let's change the world. And it starts with you. It starts with every single person. If you go out, you see somebody being racist, if you hear somebody making a comment, say something. It can be very simple. It doesn't have to be in your face, mean. Just say, I don't appreciate that. I don't appreciate it. You change somebody's mind. Just get them to think about what they're saying. Little by little by little, we can change the world. But it starts with every single person. Be that drop of food coloring in the vase by yourself. You control your surroundings. You control every person that you come in contact with. You can control that situation. So if somebody at work comes up to you and they start making a racist comment or a slur, you can say, stop. I don't approve of this. I'm not okay with this. This is not right. I don't ever want to hear it again, and walk away. You know, we don't have to promote those things that are being said to us or around us. And then secondly, I understand, more than most, everybody's saying, ACAB, all cops are bad, fuck the police, quit. I get that. I understand the rage right now. That's not going to help anything. Me quitting, I mean, think about all the suggestions that I made tonight. I have so many people that I talk to about this on a daily basis. In fact, I just had a conversation with one of my sheriffs today. I say my sheriffs because I was in charge of the Buckeye State Sheriff's Association for my agency. So I got to know every sheriff in my state. So, we had that conversation today. What are you doing to change this in your department? So getting the good guys to quit is not going to make that change. Again, I understand the sentiment. I get it. Fuck the police. But don't bash the good guys. I really am here to help, and I understand what everybody's going through. I don't even want to fathom, what Black people go through on a daily basis, or what you're thinking. Um, my heart goes out to you. I'm so sorry, but let's make a change together. You figure out who the good guys are in each department. You make friends with one of your officers in your local jurisdiction, and then let's move forward. Let's make a change together. It starts at the top, but it also starts with every person. So go meet your police chief, go meet your sheriff, go to your city council meetings, go to your county commission meetings. Make your voice heard in a respectable way. Make it heard, make changes. You can absolutely use every suggestion that we've had on here. Write them out. Make those suggestions to your police department, to your sheriff, to your governor. Write your politicians, write your senators, write your state representatives. There's so many things that you can do, and the number one thing you can do is vote. Vote these people out of office if they're bad. Vote the good ones in. Ask them the questions on how they feel about law enforcement and community policing. Ask them, raise those questions, make them answer those questions for you. And if they're bad, answers, don't vote for them.
Nicole, you are wonderful, and I thank you for hanging out for 2 hours, answering all the questions that came at you, having your own stuff. I do. I hope, and you know what? Before we go on, I don't want to think that I don't want them to think that I am avoiding the question. Archwisp has brought up in the chat, and maybe this is my own ignorance about it, right? Because sometimes I take things really literally. He's saying that that the not all cops is not literal. It's not meant that people don't mean it as or I'm sorry, like all cops are bad or whatever, ACAB, what it is. That's not supposed to be literal. It's just supposed to be a call to action. I think here's my editorializing on it. That shit's not always obvious. Like people are if we've learned one thing, is that people are very receptive to catchy things like that, and that will take that shit at face value. And that while it's may be meant to be a call to action, to clean up, and that yes there are good ones and blah blah blah, people will take that shit literally and be like, all cops are bad, fuck all cops. And then when you have that being said in front of those kids that we were just talking about that look up to the cops, like that's why shit like that is dangerous. I get that it is catchy, it incites feelings in people, but not everybody's going to know that subtlety about what you say, Archris, that it really means.
Yeah.
So yes, I wasn't dodging it, Wisp. I was just trying to find a good place to put it in. To
Yeah.
me, this is the first that I'm hearing anybody give me that distinction. And I think I'm relatively smart that I can read into things. But when I see something like ACAB, I'm like, well, fuck that, because it's not everybody. And that goes all the way back to hour one, minute one of this, is why I did this, because people like Nicole were getting shit on for it. So that's a good distinction. I'm glad you brought it up.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Um,
Yeah, white brushes don't help any cause. So I see the last question there, may have been addressed earlier, but how do we get Leo today to recognize why people are protesting and to not make the issue worse by acting brutally in these protests? That's a really hard question and hard answer. So again, we talked about earlier, they might be answering to their higher ups, right? So they might be hearing, if anybody's out past 8, whatever the curfew is, arrest them all, tear gas them all. It could be as simple as that, or it could be that um, it's an officer by officer basis, and they just want to play with the toys that they have, which we didn't touch on that either. But you know, uh, cops do have a lot of toys. We don't get to play with them often, and play is such a horrible word, because that shouldn't be how it is seen. Unfortunately, it is. So yeah, I mean, it is hard.
yeah, there was one other question uh, in the chat, and I've had this question too. I almost didn't ask it because the person that asked it was being kind of a dick, but I'll ask it anyway. I mean, we've all seen the videos of these different police forces or enforcement forces being out and not having identifiable information, not having covering up their badges under the, oh, that's a black thing for somebody who died, or blah 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 blah. That seems to that's one of the more vocal things out there now. There's one of the more common videos you see of whoever these enforcers are not having their creds on. And then there was something else that came out that, like, oh, all these officers don't, or these military guys don't have it, but they did have an insignia and nobody brought it up or whatever. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I have not seen the pictures, I'll be honest, but I have heard the discussion. And depending on the state you're in, the jurisdiction you're in, like in Ohio, you have to have your insignia on. So you have to have a patch somewhere that identifies, what agency you're with, that you're police, that you're a sheriff, that you're, whatever agency you are. So I am curious to see who those people are and why they didn't have their insignia on. I would think that is an issue. I heard somebody say, oh, those are just citizen militia. They're not actually law enforcement or military. So I really don't know the answer to that. But I know, at least in Ohio, we would catch all kinds of hell if we didn't have, our patch on our person somewhere to be identified. So
Yeah. Every time I reference this person, I'm gonna look right into the camera. Yoink and Boink asks again. A lot of good questions from Madame or Mister or they. Boink. The places I have seen it most are expensive. No, you're Yoink now. The places I've seen it are in Seattle and DC, and those are the videos we're seeing. Seattle's brutal, Minnesota brutal. Sorry, being rattled by the Cincinnati cops replacing. Oh, what about this?
yeah.
DEFCON 201. Fuck it, let's just keep going. Like, we'll keep going until we get tired of it. And by the way, I've tried a few times to be like, let's leave on a good note, and like, thank you, Nicole, blah, blah, blah. Because that's the broadcaster in me, okay? I spent years in radio, and there's a flow to these things, and I try to be sensitive to it, but fuck it, like, it's fine. So when you see me I'm not trying to get out of conversations, you fuckers. It's my radio brain, okay? So just good questions, so let's fucking keep going. The Cincinnati cops replacing the U.S. flag with the Blue Lives flag at the Justice Department.
Yeah.
The department, city, and everyone is horrified right now.
Mhm.
The fuck is that about?
I don't know what that's about. I saw it. Absolutely unacceptable. You, one, never replace the American flag with any flag, period. Secondly, especially in a time like this, you don't replace it with the very flag that people are protesting against. Um, I'm, I know the Hamilton County Sheriff. He is typically an absolutely wonderful guy. So it really surprises me that that happened. But yeah, quite frankly, I'm really surprised it hasn't been torn down, to be honest. But if I was the mayor or city council, I would order it down immediately. Yeah, flag code, exactly. Um, I have no idea why they did that. That uncalled for.
I mean, yeah,
Ask him to take it down. Good. I
yeah.
haven't seen it yet.
I mean, there's, that. I mean, if you want to really simplify it, people are fucking dicks, and but then again, that's not even that simple sometimes because what I've learned a lot lately is that what we want to see as good and evil, being friendly or being a dick or whatever, we want to ascribe these pure intentions to these things. Like you see in any movie, this person is an evil bad guy because he just wants to be evil. But most of the things that we see as evil are these people really believe this shit. Like they believe it's a good idea. They believe they're doing something good. They are holding to their morals and their ethical code because they think everybody should fucking do it. Um, so when you deal with that, like the dude I see running around, and I haven't editorialized on what's his face at all, except for this one story. When I see the dude driving down in the city where I live, that's getting ready for protests, and making sure that he has his Trump flag flying along with the blue lives, but every incendiary thing that you could conceivably do, incendiary in relation to what is about to happen. On its own, free speech, mazel tov. But in relation to what you know is about to happen, you're doing this thing for a reason. So, like, now you just beat a dick. But yeah.
Yeah.
But no, by the way, DEF CON 201 live, just so you know, I typed it already. I fucking love when you ask questions. I love when you're in here. I'm not ignoring anybody. There's just been a lot. You guys have been awesome, awesome, awesome for these. So don't ever think you're asking too much stuff. And I don't care if I try to get out of and end it gracefully. It's not always graceful. So that's fucking, don't worry about it, man. I love when you guys are here.
And before people start leaving, I just want to say, my DMs are open. If you have a question, I will answer to the best of my ability. By all means, there's nothing that I won't answer. So, shoot me a message if you didn't get your question answered here.
Do you ever have
Um,
the urge to not have your DMs open? I mean, that's risky normally.
yeah. Honestly, I think that people see my bio, and I don't get a lot of the craziness that other females specifically get. But yeah, I do get all kinds of crazy messages, just not dick
I
pics or
haven't
anything.
gotten a lot, and I'm not soliciting for any.
Ooh.
Uh, but I have got a couple, especially about the whole like ACAB thing and But then I've had very nice ones from friends of mine that are like, I don't fucking agree with what you're doing, but like, good for you for doing it. And I'm like, all right, well that's fine. I think the same about you, so that's fine. Um, Although there's always that, and yes, you can block and you can do this and not read it, but like it's not always easy as that. But yeah, she does have her DMs open at Nicole Beckwith. Is that the easiest place for people to get a hold of you if they want to ask you something?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I think unless somebody gives me another paragraph of questions, mention, by the way, fucking have at it. Um, the Getting back to the whole reason why I wanted to do this, I wanted to do this simply because Nicole is my friend, and simply because I know the kind of good person that she is, and I know that there are probably lots of situations like this happening in families, in friend circles, in professional circles, and honestly, when you boil it right down, it is the same. It is the same old story of people who have different like political ideals, and then elections come around and shit gets hot, and then all of a sudden you're not seeing each other at Christmas anymore because you fucking hate each other. Like it's all of that. I am trying my hardest to keep to keep my temper, to keep my disgust down, and it's hard. It's super hard when you see these videos that are coming out. It's easy to want to turn it off and things like that. So if I can do anything, it's that just that there is, while there is gray, there is also absolute right and absolute wrong, and just trying to balance those things out, and starting at the bottom, and I'm going to keep rambling because it is a very emotional topic, and it's a very hot button, especially now because it's still the wounds are, they're old but they're new. You know, at the same time, they're very very old, but they keep getting ripped open again and again. So to that end, we have good people. We have good people like Nicole. We have good leaders. We have good people like in the videos you see of the National Guard speaking like humans to people, of cops kneeling, and yes, then there are people that'll say those are just token gestures and blah blah blah. It's something, and we need something. Like, you can't take every good thing you see and ascribe something evil to it, because the fuck is that gonna do? Honestly, like, can't live like that. So, at Nicole Beckwith, right? That's your thing on Twitter.
Absolutely.
Nicole, I will say goodbye to you officially, but hang out after the stream is done, because I think we're going to have some games. Not live. It's going to be a... If you want to do games, or if you're tired, you can go to sleep too.
Okay.
So yes, thank you everybody. Thank you everybody who tossed up some of those little bits and dime. I appreciate that. Subscribers. Yes, Coleman, we're going to play games, so hang around. Yes, games in Discord. So come in Discord. It's going to be a private thing. Thank you everybody who subscribed. Thank you everybody who came at this maybe with an open mind. Even thank you to the one guy who was a dick in the chat. That's fine too. That's your right. But yes, thank you to everybody. And oh, what's the chat for the link for the Discord? Hold on, I'm going to bring it up right now. Do some magic, and it is up on screen right now. So that link is permanent. Ooh, now Artros, now that you're here, you can hang out to actually hear me play your music when I play Nicole out. That is the link for the Discord. Come on in. And anybody who wants to play tonight, we'll figure that out. Nicole Beckwith, I love you so much, and I'm going to talk to you very very soon. I'll probably text you like 10 minutes after this is over. So with that said, we be out.
Peace.
Where's my closing thing? God damn it. God, it was all going so smoothly.